there's still, the 5-year-old version of Anabel
Yes.
inside of me, and the 19-year-old in
Yeah.
Italy with you, Anabel, inside of me. And there's a part of me that, is still Anabel in her 20s, but now I'm all of those things and more.
Yes.
And so now, rather than allowing it to take me by surprise that I've changed so much and have it be almost scary, I want to embrace that. I want to
Mm.
look for it. I want to seek it out. I want to check in with myself and who I am today and who I want to be tomorrow, and whether I'm doing enough to keep an open heart and an open mind to have a fully human experience, to thrive and to create the life that I want to live.
I'm Joey Youngjun Liu, educator, researcher, storyteller, and coach. And this is Everyone Needs a Story for the Campfire. This podcast brings you impactful stories each week, drawn from my guests' lived experiences. You will gain inspiration, insight, new perspectives, and hopefully a sense of familiarity and belonging as we explore the themes that make us all at once uniquely individual, yet collectively human. This week, I sit down with Anabel Munoz, the wonderfully talented TV news journalist at ABC7 Los Angeles, one of the most intentional and generous people I've ever met, and also someone I'm lucky to call one of my best friends. In her story, Anabel explores the idea of giving herself permission to change and to not have everything figured out. And in another story, she explores the topic of grieving past versions of herself as she has matured into who she is today, embracing who she will be tomorrow in this process of continual loss and becoming. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Everyone Needs a Story for the Campfire, the podcast. This week, I'm sitting down with Anabel Munoz, news reporter at ABC7 Los Angeles. She's an avid coffee connoisseur, a lifelong learner, a woman with a heart of gold, and one of my very best friends in the world. I'm so lucky to have you here. I'm so lucky also to have grown up with you since the age of 19 when we met in our study abroad program to Rome back in 2007. And I wanted to tell the perfect story to introduce you, but I really had to dig deep because we lived so much life together. And as I was reflecting, I just, realized that not only do we have so many stories shared together, we've gone through so many ups and downs together, but also a lot of the stories that I've had the honor to witness or participate with you in your life, they just feel so sacred. And I really appreciate that you as a public figure, you are so sensitive, so protective over keeping what's sacred. And so I want to honor that. But I think the story I will tell today to introduce you is the story of how we first met. The first time I ever saw you, Anabel, you probably remember this. You were with your lifelong best friend, Gloria. Shout out to Gloria. We love you, who's also now become one of my best friends. But this is the picture that I see when I first meet Anabel and Gloria. It's community college. We're 19. Everyone else is, we're trying to be cool. We are trying to be individuals, right? And Gloria and Anabel unashamedly show up to the airport, dressed head to toe identically. Super girly little outfits, matching luggage, matching purses, matching laptop bags, down to the keychain and the ballet flats. You were matching everything. And I was just like, this is ridiculous. Who are these girls? I mean, I was intrigued. You were obviously having so much fun, laughing, enjoying each other's company. You came off super friendly, but I was just like, me as a tomboy, as an introvert, it's like, there's no way that we're going to click. And then we get to Rome. And we find out that we're going to be housemates for the entire semester that we're studying there. And I am so grateful for that because it became the beginning of our lifelong friendship, sisterhood. And I got to experience really like the inside scoop of who is Anabel Munoz, and what most people who only see you as, this super polished, professional, amazing reporter on TV don't know about you is that you are one of the most ridiculous, hilarious people I have ever met. I have memories of you chasing Gloria through a TV, what is it called? A movie rental store.
Blockbuster.
yeah, an Italian version of a Blockbuster with the ring. She's like screaming. We shared moments of twirling in public squares in Italy. Like, you just are so unserious. You just don't care in many ways about what people think. You live in the moment. You've taught me so much about having fun, and balancing that with also having a very serious and very ethical side to you, especially in the work that you do. So I'm just so honored and so grateful to sit down with you today. Welcome to my show, Anabel.
Thank you. It's so strange to be interviewed and to be interviewed by one of your best friends, but it's also like we talked about a really safe space. And then just really quickly speaking to your story about how we met. It's so funny that the way the world works, in bringing people together and ensuring that friendships blossom. Because I remember you were like on the phone trying to get out of the house that you were going to live in with us because you wanted your own family. You were like, I'm here to learn and I don't want to be with these other two girls.
They're like, not serious. I can't spend my precious months that I'm supposed to be fluent in learning Italian with these girls who are here to take thousands of selfies and buy matching outfits, which was such an unfair assessment.
Here we are, 15 years later.
Here we
15 years, yeah.
I think more. I think it's
2007.
7.
Okay, yeah.
I'm not going to do the math right now, but it's been a hot minute, and I wouldn't have it any other way. So thank you so much for being here. And, my show it's not as simple as an interview show. And I really want my audience, like, just to get a little bit of the inside scoop on this, I want to commend my guests for coming, especially my first few guests who are forging into the unknown without really a precedence. But I think in interview shows, there is a level of safety in that the host kind of like carries you through, guides you through with questions. And here, because the concept of this podcast is centered on stories and storytelling, my guests have really had to do a bit of homework and preparation in coming here. And even if it's unscripted and, in many ways still an authentically shared story from the heart, there's been so much deep reflection. And I just want to thank you for taking time out of your very busy life and very important profession to spend time with me here and to have even put the time into preparing your stories that we're about to hear. So I want to introduce the first story that you have told me you will share, and that is centered on the theme of permission.
Yeah, so permission, when I think about permission, I think also about freedom. And part of my experience with freedom and permission started unexpectedly, and it started with something almost superficial or maybe trivial, but in my experience, it was very transformative. When I started my career as a TV news reporter, I had this very clear idea of what I thought a TV news reporter should be like. And so maybe what she is supposed to look like or what they are supposed to sound like. And so I tried very hard to fit this box. And I was very comfortable in that box. I felt like I was myself in some ways. And somewhere along the line, one of the ways that I realized that I was trying to fit this box, and it, started long before the career, was my hair. So I wasn't comfortable in my natural hair. It's mostly wavy. It's not that curly, but I would straighten it. And that's how I felt the most beautiful and professional. And so at some point I had the desire to, what if I wear my natural hair on air? And I had one experience that was really negative where before I worked where I work now, I was somewhere else and I was essentially admonished for wearing my hair that way. And I was asked to continue straightening it. And I just it made me sad. It just kind of discouraged me, but I accepted it. And I figured there's nothing I can really do about this. I am expected to look a different way and I'll just keep doing that. And then years later, as I started working at ABC, I felt that kind of like gnawing again of wear your hair, or rather than wear your hair natural, be who you are naturally. And so that started a process of, okay, let me try to be more authentic in that way. And it didn't necessarily, what that wasn't necessarily the goal, but I just wanted to feel comfortable in my skin, the way that I woke
Yes.
up and the way that I
Mm.
didn't have to change for someone else, right? Like
Yes.
I knew that my hair, I could style it and be professional, and it may not be what people are used to. But I wanted to be comfortable, and I knew that my work and my my work ethic and my work would speak for themselves versus the way that I looked. And so it was a very long journey. At first, I just didn't feel like myself. I felt like when I was on camera and my hair was curly, I didn't recognize that woman. I didn't think that she was beautiful. And
Mm.
I forced myself to continue that process, as uncomfortable as it was,
Mm.
because I wanted to love myself in all of these forms.
Mm.
And I didn't want my decisions to be guided by how I wanted to be perceived versus who I really am. And as a
Mhm.
storyteller, I want to be authentic um, in the way that I tell stories.
Right.
And so that just really started a whole process of being more authentic. It started with the hair, but it translated into so many other areas of my life, within my career and outside of it, and having that freedom and not seeking that permission. And really, there's so many other women and people who have paved the way, for reporters, for people on air to be their authentic selves, because this is true not just on camera but also behind the camera.
Mm.
And yeah, it just kind of started with hair, but as many people listening probably know and have experienced, it's so much more than that.
Absolutely. Yes. And, thank you for surfacing your story and actually recognizing why it's so much more than hair. It's not just a hair story. It's not a superficial story. It's not really so much about the way you looked, but about who gives us permission, who holds the power over
Mhm.
how we validate ourselves, how we
Mm.
allow ourselves to show up in the world and in different spaces. You're right, it's so much more than hair, but I can imagine for someone in your position who has to be on camera every day and who has so many people's eyes on you and so many opinions about what you're supposed to sound like and look like and talk like and all these things, that pressure must have been so immense. You mentioned a little bit that this permission you gave yourself to wear your hair naturally and to actually just show up the way you woke up, right? To be naturally you, how that translated into authenticity in other areas of your life. Can you dive into that a little bit deeper and give us more examples of
Mhm.
what other permissions you ended up experiencing for yourself as you went on that journey?
Yeah. I think some of those things happened um, at the same time. I don't, now that I think about it, I don't know if one caused the other. If
Mm-hmm.
the hair component um, really triggered all of these other things, but it certainly, I think, gave me the strength to know that I have been authentic in this difficult area of my life. And so, if I can be authentic in that way, then I can be authentic in other ways too. And I
Right.
can check in with myself about what that means. And so, I think one of the other ways I have sought freedom is in understanding that, there's so much that I felt when I was younger that I had figured out. And when I came to the realization that maybe I didn't hold the same beliefs, or maybe I just had questions, um, whether it was about the world or about my faith, giving myself the freedom to be okay with not knowing some things and not putting anything in a box, and being free in the reality that who I am, um, is someone I'm becoming
Mm.
constantly. And as I started this process, much of it was in, you know, examining my faith, and where it was rooted and what parts were real to me, and where maybe I disagreed with things that I maybe believed in the past. And and that was uncomfortable. And so, I found the freedom to really allow myself to go through this process in large part by reading from other women, other theologians, particularly those of color who have charted that path and who have
Right.
shared their thoughts and who have been incredibly vulnerable in what that process was like. And I read a book that really felt like a balm to my spirit. And
Mm.
um, I just felt really validated in some of these experiences and in having the freedom to listen in and read in on someone else's journey that was very similar in some ways. And so this book is called Abuelita Faith. It means grandmother faith. And Kat Armas wrote this book. And it's about the what we can learn from women on the margins,
Mm.
and and our grandmothers and our ancestors,
Right.
and this experience that she graciously shared. And she said, "I realize now how dangerous it is to think we've arrived at enlightenment, at
Mm.
certainty about ourselves, about God. I'm still figuring it all out day by day. Some days I'm confident and hopeful, and others, well, other days I just get by."
Mm.
And I thought that was so beautiful because, in many ways, in faith spaces that I had grown up in, it was about, having something figured out and following the rules, and not a whole lot of space for actually there's a lot maybe we don't have figured out, and that we're
Right.
learning
Yeah.
together, and um, that you learn in your experience and your relationship with the sacred. And so that was really freeing to read
Mm.
about that experience and
Mhm.
be in that journey myself.
It's such a radical permission to accept and internalize that not everything has to be known all at once, right? That we
Yeah.
can be in these states of, I think the quote mentions like some days feeling really confident in what we know, and then other days feeling like we don't really have so much figured out. That permission, I think you attached it to freedom at the beginning of your story, and I feel like it brings it full circle. What
Yeah.
freedom it gives us just to be where we're at any given moment of our life, whether it's something outward presenting, like you mentioned, with our hair or appearance or how others perceive us, or really going all the way to the core of our internal soul, right? And
Yeah.
understanding, why am I here on earth? Why am I having the experiences I'm having? What am I meant to do? What is purpose and meaning for me, and not just me, but for the communities I intersect with and the entire collective of humanity? Almost, it feels like what I'm hearing in these themes that you're surfacing in your story. So thank you. What a powerful message to all of us. And I hope that anyone who's listening, who's struggled to find that permission within themselves, can maybe, that this story can help catalyze a little bit more
Yeah.
of that seeking within, that gives us so much peace, permission, and freedom to just be where we're at and continue on our journey one step at a time.
Thank you.
And I think that as you are sharing these memories and these reflections around growing and changing, even in our fundamental belief system and how we make sense of ourselves and the world, you're kind of now touching on what your second story that you've prepared for us today is going to be, and how giving permission to not know everything and to explore new ways of knowing also tied into some deeper emotions of grief or loss and mourning for you. Um, are you ready to share that story with us?
Yes. So it's crazy to look back on the different versions of who I am and who I've been. And in those early years where I felt like I knew everything, or at least I thought I knew everything that mattered.
Mm.
I thought I had kind of my foundation solid about my world and my about myself and my place in the world. Um, and then early on in my 30s, I experienced a lot of grief. I lost many of my loved ones, and that's an experience that I hadn't had before.
Mm.
I experience grieving relationships with loved ones and relationships that were maybe just changing, and all while there's so much happening in the world, right? In the last 4 years, we've all lived through so much grief together,
Mhm.
particularly starting in 2020. And so, now it's been 4 years, like almost half a decade of a really challenging time.
Yeah.
And I think those years changed me. And I continue, the longer that I walk this earth, the longer that I tell stories as a journalist, the more that I learn, the more that I realize I don't have figured out, the more that I realize I need to keep learning, the more that I
Mm.
realize that I can't put anything in a box, or anyone in a box. And in
Right.
many ways, when it comes to religion, I can't put God in a box. I
Mm.
can't, like, there's just so much, and so losing that version of myself, I longed for her in some ways because she was really carefree. Um, she thought she knew it all, but she was
Mm.
okay with that. And that's like the Matrix kind of situation, I guess, right? And
Mhm.
I miss that feeling. And despite the ways that I feel like I have lived more and suffered more and loved more and learned more and lost, all of these ideas of who I thought I was, I wouldn't trade that because I am so grateful to feel more human. I
Mm.
think that all of those experiences that made me feel more made me more human and made me desire, um, to be more human in in every way, in the
Mm.
way that I interact with the world, in the way that I process my thoughts, in the way that, I have relationships with my husband and with my loved ones, and it's also grieving. I think other people grieve other versions of yourself,
Oof.
right? Like when you change,
Yes.
when you have these transformative moments, it can be scary for people who've only known one version of you.
Right.
And it's hard because, I think in some ways I am a people pleaser, and I want people to feel comfortable with where I'm at. And sometimes, I may not see eye to eye with people who want me to be an old version of myself.
Mm.
And so holding love for them,
Yes.
um, and embracing the journey that I'm on, and
Yes.
continuing to strengthen my spirit and my mind, um, in continuing on this path, which is going to be, lifelong. I'm so glad that it doesn't end. I'm so glad that I can continue to grow as a person, and to learn and to live a full life because of
Mm.
that.
Okay. I'm going to ask a few questions so that we can dig deeper into maybe 3 different areas of that story.
Okay.
Um, so, well, let me say this first. Thank you so much for preparing that particular story for us because I just don't hear it told enough. And it reminds me of a saying that I was very fortunate to hear from my good friend and mentor, Kelly, who this podcast is actually named after. But she gave me the
Mm.
phrase that you'll be 100 different versions of yourself before it's over, right?
Hmm.
And I think that was very freeing for me to know that I can live through these different phases. I can reinvent myself, or I can bring um, whatever new knowledge I'm gaining forward with me. But I want to acknowledge that in general, most of us don't hear this type of story enough to really give us the confidence to go through these different versions of ourselves with that full grace and permission, and to also give space for the grieving and mourning that goes along with it. So I want to ask you first, what did the grieving process look like when you realized you were losing older versions of yourself?
I think for a long time, I didn't realize that I was losing a version of myself because I felt like any day now she's coming back.
Wow.
Um, and I thought maybe I just need to get past, certain challenges or trials, and then I'll be back to my old self. And
Right.
then I think at some point, years passed by and I realized I'm definitely not her anymore.
Mm.
And I had conversations with my therapist about this, and about how I missed who I once was. And I think it was my
Mhm.
therapist who really helped me um, understand the way that I had been shaped by life and the experiences that I had, the grief, the just by virtue of getting older, we just lived through more,
Mhm.
and the beauty that there was in that. So I think that that was part of it. I think that I used to think of my old self, who was so carefree and so naive, as the epitome of what joy felt like and
Wow.
what being at peace with the world felt
Mm.
like.
Right.
And so I asked my therapist, as life happens and we encounter these really difficult moments, how can I at the same time as I am grieving have joy? How can I have joy all the time? I just want joy. And and he was like, well, maybe the goal isn't joy, but maybe the goal is to, he said it in Spanish, my therapist, and my therapy is in Spanish, but he said, tal vez la meta es vivir una vida plena.
Mm.
I love how that sounds in Spanish.
Yes.
Maybe the goal is to
Plena.
live a full life.
Right.
And I was just like, what?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So I don't have to be waiting for like a constant moment of uninterrupted joy. Like life is all of these things at the same.
Yes.
Have you seen the show Resident Alien?
No, sorry, I can't relate.
Okay, so it's the last episode that we just watched, and my husband got me into the show, and it's just really sweet. It's this is not an ad, but it's on Netflix right now. I think originally it was like on the Sci-Fi Channel. So this alien lands on Earth, and he takes on human form, and starts to live with humans and learn from humans and understand their emotions, and starts to feel more human than alien, or
Mm.
just some human, and is uncomfortable with fear and anger and sadness. And he's like, why do I feel all these things? Um and so he befriends a girl on the show, and she's grieving and she's just so sad, and he has the power to erase your memory and give
Wow.
you new memories. And so
Mm.
he's like, okay, I'm going to erase this bad memory, and she's going to be okay.
Mm.
And by erasing her memory, he just sets off a series of events that end up hurting her in a
Mm.
different way. And he's like, well, I was just trying to protect you.
Right.
And she was like, part of being human is having all of these feelings, and not
Yeah.
just happiness, but also
Mhm.
grief and sadness. It makes you who you are. And we learn so much from it. I'm paraphrasing. But I think I used to think in binaries a lot,
Mm.
and that includes human emotions and experiences. I thought it's one or the other, and I have to constantly be striving for the other, which is joy and
Mm.
happiness. And in one day, we can experience all of those emotions, and
Yeah.
that there's beauty in that.
Wow. Thank you. You know what? You just answered my second question that I wanted to dive a little deeper in, because you had said that in this process of losing the older versions of yourself and that blissful naive version of yourself, that you learn to be more human. And I wasn't expecting the answer to come in a synopsis of Resident Alien, but I think that you gave me your answer. So, and you know what? Shout out Resident Alien on Netflix, because this is why I say we need to be creative and put out art. You never know what story, whether it's a show about an alien or a personal narrative or a poem or a song, you never know what's going to be that light bulb moment for somebody to make everything okay with being here on earth and being human and navigating this whole journey that has so much uncertainty and so many ups and downs and so many things to figure out. So thank you for actually deep diving a little bit into this show that you appreciate, and sharing with us what it means to be a human in this context. What I'm hearing is that it means that we have the unique privilege to feel so many things at once. In a non-binary, we think about binaries and I automatically think of computers and machines, but humans are complex, right? And layered, and we can be experiencing, like you said, in the same day or even the same moment, multiple emotions, multiple truths, multiple perspectives all at once. And it's our absolute privilege to age and become more aware of the all-togetherness of humanity, right?
Yeah.
So thank you for that. As we kind of tie up this story that you've so generously and so articulately shared with us about grieving old versions of ourselves through many other experiences of grief and loss, you touched on actually some collective grief that we've gone through in the last few years as well, and how that's also catalyzed some of this learning for you. I guess my last question then, and we can wrap up the story with this question, is where do you sit now with looking forward at the rest of your human journey? Where do you sit now with this awareness that you will continue to evolve and maybe continue to lose even this current version of yourself, or more familiar versions of yourself? What does that feel like for you?
I think coming to terms with losing one version of myself, and maybe others along the way that I didn't so consciously lose, has been not just transformative, but it has challenged me to be more intentional now about the process. I feel like in some ways it happened to me and I became someone else. And I'm so grateful for who I am and what I've learned along the way and the ways that I have changed and the parts of me that remain the same. There's still, the 5-year-old version of Anabel inside of me and the 19-year-old in Italy with you, Anabel, inside of me. And there's a part of me that, is still Anabel in her 20s. But now I'm all of those things and more. And so now, rather than allowing it to take me by surprise that I've changed so much and have it be almost scary, I want to embrace that. I want to look for it. I want to seek it out. I want to check in with myself and who I am today and who I want to be tomorrow, and whether I'm doing enough to keep an open heart and an open mind to have a fully human experience, to thrive and to create the life that I want to live. And, I think you've done that incredibly well. And you've set the example for being in tune with yourself and what your heart is calling out for. And the fact that you picked up and moved home, and started an entirely new life and did something that most people are too afraid perhaps to do at maybe any stage of one's life when you're comfortable or uncomfortable. But, I desire to have that, to be so in tune with the world and the way that it speaks to me and who I am created and meant to be, that I'm constantly looking and listening and taking those leaps of faith, whether it means moving somewhere else or whether it means picking up a new hobby or exposing myself to different experiences, being uncomfortable, going on a hike, like all of those things I think can be transformative. And I want to seek them out.
Thank you, Anabel. That was such a beautiful response. And I think it is so illuminating. And I hope it's so helpful to anyone who hears this, that the transformations really can happen on levels big and small, right?
Mm-hmm.
So as I appreciate so much your reflection of, this adventure I've taken on my life, but it doesn't take selling your house and moving 1,000 miles away to be who you're supposed to be when you wake up tomorrow, right? And I think you really captured it with that word intention and listening and seeking. Those tools can bring us so far in helping us align with our authentic self, and then helping us walk our path and write the story of our life that we're really destined to write. You're just such a beautiful example of that. And the story that you shared here with me today is such a beautiful example. I hope that it helps many people who are feeling, similar themes in their life and asking similar questions of themselves. So thank you for your generosity in sharing that story.
Thank you. Thank you for creating a safe space.
I try, and I'm just so grateful to be here with you. Okay, we are going to wrap up this episode with one last pondering around the theme, the overarching theme of this season. I've invited guests with me this season to who all have experience with sharing stories to an audience, stories that reach, right? So even though I believe every single one of us is a storyteller and we all have a story to share and we all engage in sharing of stories in our personal life, some of us have taken story sharing a little bit further and shared stories with complete strangers on a wider platform. And you, of course, choosing the profession to be a TV news reporter, live and breathe this every day. So what does sharing stories that reach others and reach strangers, what does that mean to you?
It's still kind of surreal that I have the privilege and the responsibility to tell stories every day. And, the area that I cover is race and culture, and that just includes so many wide-ranging topics and experiences, particularly in Southern California. And it's still surreal to me that I get to do that, and that there is a platform through which I can tell these stories, and that there is a newsroom where I have the support to tell stories that are meaningful, to invest in the process that requires, and to do so with as much care as we can. And it doesn't cease to amaze me the impact that stories can have. And, mind you, we don't necessarily see the impact every day. I would say most days you don't see a tangible impact of a story that you cover. But there are moments that remind me that the reach is significant, that we have a responsibility to serve the communities that we are supposed to serve, and that we have a responsibility to ask questions, to seek truth, to hold people in positions of power accountable.
Right.
And that process can really be a vehicle for shaping the society that we live in, whether that is in a good way or whether that is harmful.
Right.
And so, I see the impact of local news, of the way that when we cover a story, it has the ability to sometimes shape policy, or simply to raise awareness about someone's experience or about any given issue. And so I'm constantly reminded that there is a huge reach, that it matters, and that the responsibility that we have is tremendous. At the same time, I think that with what we are seeing through social media, the way that people are really telling their own stories is very beautiful.
Yes.
There was a time where people were sitting at home to watch the news at a particular time, and that's where stories were predominantly told. But we see through all of these social media platforms that community members are telling stories and are helping shape the stories that we're covering in our newsrooms. And so there's this beautiful relationship that we can now have because of that.
Thank you so much for that insight. It's such a unique perspective because so few of us are TV news reporters and have that experience. But I love the way you speak about your job. It's so much more than a job. And I've felt that from the first day that you even started reporting the news while you were still in college and undergraduate school, you've always had such an immense sense of service and responsibility in doing this role. It has never been about notoriety or recognition, but really about the impact that you can have in sharing stories, in getting the stories right, in getting the stories to the right people, the right audience, to make that change that it has the power to make. So thank you again for being you, for Anabel. You're so necessary in this world. I'm so grateful that I get to know you so intimately. Thank you for spending this time with me on this podcast. And being here at the beginning while I'm just starting out and learning so much. It's been such a joy. And I can't wait to have you back one day and to spend more time with you. I know I'm really far away right now, but I can't wait to give you a big hug and kiss when I see you.
I'm so honored. I can talk with you for hours. This was exciting and scary. And as usual, our conversations touch a very deep place in my heart. And I'm grateful for those, whether it's on a podcast or just the two of us.
Yes, absolutely. And they matter equally in many ways, no matter if there's an audience or if it's just something that shapes us and nourishes us. Story sharing, I think, whether told in intimate and in sacred spaces or in public spaces, I think it's so powerful, and I think it's what makes us so human, and we're so lucky to continue doing this for the rest of our lives together. So thank you again. Okay, everyone, thank you for tuning in. I can't wait to see you next week with more stories with our next amazing guest here on Everyone Needs a Story for the Campfire. I'll see you next week, guys. Bye. I hope you were as inspired as I was by Anabel's stories. If you'd like to continue following her work and gathering inspiration from her and the stories she shares, you can find her on Instagram at ABC7Anabel. The link will be below in the description. I'm so grateful for Anabel for being here on this episode, and I'm so grateful for you, my audience, for tuning in. We hope to see you in a couple weeks from now with our next episode and our next guest bringing their stories to the campfire.